Hello. Looking here at Christopher Cross's debut album from 1979. I picked this up secondhand over a year ago. And I know it was over a year ago because it still has the price tag on it, which I haven't taken off because it's on a difficult thing to get off, that kind of grated plastic. But the 8th of February 2022 for $1. It's a pretty good bargain, I reckon. A Christopher Cross album. This Christopher Cross album for $1. You can see, just from when I kind of tilt it down, you can see it's kind of I talk about the plastic often has this smokiness when it gets to a certain age, and it's I don't know if it's like an accumulation of scratches or just I don't exactly know what does it. The newer plastic that they used in CDs from the late '90s onwards doesn't do that as much. It kind of keeps this sheen. It's a lot cleaner plastic. But the stuff they used in the 80s and early 90s does have a tendency to do this. Not a big deal, but something you do notice. So the black edging, like I said, this was originally released in 1979, the album. As for the CD uh, issuing, I'm not sure what year that was. I was trying to look for a year early, but I couldn't see anything. This says it was made in France, and there's a little bit of French language down here. So it's a pretty classic album, and it birthed one particular song, I guess two really, but one particular song that has transcended the album and kind of become part of the popular music canon of the late 20th century. Sailing. That's the kind of song that if I played it to someone of a certain age, even if they didn't know who Christopher Cross was, I'd play that song, they would probably recognize that song because it was so pervasive in popular culture for a time, and still played on the radio and in shops and TV shows and all sorts of other things. Um, so Christopher Cross, what would you class him as? As I guess soft rock. Now there's this term that has been retrospectively applied to him and to this particular period of his album, and that is yacht rock. And yacht rock, I don't know. In some ways, I think it's a good descriptor, but otherwise, I don't like the kind of postmodern, ironic kind of approach that kind of takes. It's like a smiling at the side of your face kind of appreciating the music in an ironic sense, but it's not really ironic if you like the music. But I don't know. There's something about that I don't like. Now the guys who created the term yacht rock were these I think they're like comedy writers or they're based in LA, and they released a YouTube series like in the very early days of YouTube, like maybe 2007, 2006, maybe 2008, and it's kind of just like a joke kind of comedy show based on artists of a certain era: Doobie Brothers, Michael McDonald, Hall and Oates, Kenny Loggins, and kind of the music we associate with that time. And anyway, it's hard to describe that without watching it, but they kind of created that as a joke. But then they came to appreciate the music. Those guys, it's a J.D. Riznar and Hunter Steer, David Lyons, and Steve Huey. Steve Huey, who incidentally, who writes or used to write, I don't know if he still does, for the All Music Guide online. I've talked about that before. They went on to create a podcast called Beyond Yacht Rock. Now, I really highly recommend that podcast because they coined the term, and they kind of lost control of it. And when people say yacht rock nowadays, they basically apply any kind of soft rock to yacht rock, like the Eagles and shit like that. Whereas that isn't what yacht rock is. And they tried to define in this podcast precisely what yacht rock was. They use a certain kind of definitions, criteria. And looking at this album in some ways does fit into that. One of the ways it does fit into that is the musicians that Christopher Cross used in the recording for this, and the producer. The producer was Michael Omartian. And if you Google him or Wikipedia him, you see the amount of artists he has worked with, particularly in that kind of late 70s, early 80s period a lot, but also before and after that as well. He's a prolific producer. But we closely associate him and his work with a lot of these so-called yacht rock artists. And then does it have, over here we have some of the musicians. So he uses like session musicians. So we've got the ones that I recognize from the yacht rock session musician players are Larry Carlton, Lenny Castro, Victor Feldman. Of course, Michael McDonald famously did background vocals on this, and Michael McDonald went on to be in Doobie Brothers, and they did What a Fool Believes, which is kind of considered one of the preeminent yacht rock songs. So yeah, there's a certain group of LA West Coast session musicians who play on a lot of this kind of yacht rock type stuff, and we associate a lot of them with very high skilled guys that have played on countless artist stuff, and yeah. So this particular album, what else we got? We got Say You'll Be Mine. That's probably my least favorite song on the album. There's something about that I don't like, the piano in the chorus. Really Don't Know Anymore. I like that song. Spinning, that's a duet. Never Be the Same. It's a great song. Poor Shirley's okay. Ride Like the Wind is a classic. Apparently he wrote that. Christopher Cross wrote the lyrics for Ride Like the Wind when he was on acid. Not really an acid song. If I listen, obviously I'm not saying he wrote the music on acid, but the lyrics to say, if it's about some guy who is committed a crime and he's trying to escape the law down to Mexico, and he's got to ride like the wind, go quickly to get to Mexico to freedom. Yeah, again, not kind of typical psychedelic type subject matter, but yeah. The Light Is On, that's a great song. And Sailing, now like I said before, Sailing is kind of one of those songs that transcends the artist who made it, because it becomes such a popular song, or a song that everyone's heard in some state. And so it is a beautiful song, Sailing. And that's another thing we often associate with yacht rock is smoothness. And when we say smooth, like what is smoothness in music? I guess like kind of relaxing, calm, no massive tempo changes, no kind of bombastic instrumentation, drums very light, maybe brushes. Apparently he wrote that song Sailing when the lyrics from a time, he didn't write it when he was a teenager, but it was inspired by when he was a teenager. He had a friend when he was at high school. His friend was a lot older than him, kind of like a big brother, not his big brother, but like a big brother. And he used to take him out sailing when Christopher Cross was going through difficult times as a teenager, and the guy would take him out sailing to just kind of show him that you can get away from it and relax, and there are nice things out there in the world. And so they lost touch, him and his friend. Christopher Cross wrote that song. I think he was quite young when he wrote it. I think he was about 20 or something. And then in the mid-90s, Howard Stern, of all people, Howard Stern, in the Howard Stern show, reunited Christopher Cross with the guy, with his high school friend. He hadn't seen him for like 20, 30 years. He reunited him, and they kind of, he thanked him for, what he had done for him when he was a teenager. And I think he gave him one of the platinum records that he got for Sailing as a kind of thank you. That's kind of a beautiful thing to obviously it had a big effect on him, that if he would write a song because it had such a place in his memory, the experience of sailing. Again, yacht rock, sailing, that's another thing that people associate with yacht rock is, the nautical, or at least sailing, wind-powered sea journeys. So yeah, it's a pretty iconic album. It's a pretty iconic cover art as well, isn't it? The pink flamingo. He never really captured this level of success again, Christopher Cross. There's an album he did in was it 85? Can't remember the name. The one that's on it has got a song called Snake Charmer or Charm the Snake. Every Turn of the World. Okay, that's the name of it. Every Turn of the World. And it's got on the picture, it's got a picture of a guy like a racing car, kind of shot looking at a guy racing a car, like a Formula One car or something like that. And there's a song on it, called Charm the Snake. And I don't mind that song. That's quite a cool song. But by that stage, he'd kind of moved away and kind of tried to go more rock, pop rock at least, unsuccessfully. That album got to 127 on the Billboard chart. So but he had a few other popular songs, like he did the Arthur's theme for the movie with Burt Bacharach, and Think of Laura, that was 83. But yeah, certainly past the mid 80s, he didn't really have any kind of major success. He continued making albums, and he caught COVID quite early. This was when COVID was first around, like March. I think it was like March or April 2020. I think quite a lot of musicians got it because they were touring before we fully understood what it was, and he got it, and he got quite a bad case, and as a consequence, he got, was it called Guillain-Barré, the one where he was paralyzed. So it says, okay, here we go. I'll just read this part. So on April 3rd, 2020, Cross confirmed through his Facebook page he had tested positive for COVID-19 and was ill but recovering. He later reported on Twitter that he had lost the use of his legs, but his doctors told him he should fully recover. Physicians told him his COVID-19 disease triggered an episode of Guillain-Barré syndrome that caused the nerves in his legs to stop functioning properly. By October, he was able to walk with a cane, but he said his memory and speech had been badly affected. In 2021 and 2022, he played the 40th anniversary concert tour. So he's back out on tour, or at least he was last year. So that's good that he's recovered enough to do that. But I heard actually there's a few people who had the same thing, Guillain-Barré, as kind of like what do you call it, a sequentia, is that what they call it? Where the kind of the after effect of a disease can be quite bad for some people, especially one like COVID that has kind of a really gets into your immune system and can do some damage. So yeah, Christopher Cross, someone of what we'd call a part of yacht rock. And whatever you think about that term, yacht rock, I really do recommend that that podcast I said, Beyond Yacht Rock. It's finished now. They did about 200 episodes. And what they do is it's not all about yacht rock. They kind of start off each episode with a song, what's it called? Like a hidden gem, like a yacht rock song you might not have heard before. And then they make up another genre. And every episode they have a different genre. And then they have also a yacht or Nyot, where you can send in a song and say, is this yacht rock? And they would judge it and give it a score based on criteria. And so something like Christopher Cross's Sailing might get 100 or 99 out of 100, and as a essential yacht rock, whereas other songs are more like 70, 60, and then if it's below 50, then it's Nyot. So if I sent in, for example, the Eagles, Peaceful, Easy Feeling, And some people say, well, that's a really smooth, calm song. They would say that is definitely not rock because it doesn't use e-piano. It doesn't feature certain session musicians. It doesn't have a bounce to the rhythm. So it's got to kind of fit into all these different things. Anyway, I'm not an expert on this, but it's a great, and not just that, it's a good way to just discover new music as well, that podcast. So if you're a music fan, I really do recommend it. I also recommend this album, Christopher Cross. Not that I think it needs recommendation. It's a pretty classic album by this stage. All right, thank you for watching.